So
No, don't do it yet.
Oh, I already clicked. It's okay. I can cut it out of the initial part out anyways. But wait, by the way, I was gonna ask, are we doing one of
You're yelling. Okay.
those recap things? Like,
I'll leave that to you. And also,
what? This was a really hard chapter to read through temptation. What?
Yes, it was. I made it kind of, I
Nothing about
cheated and kind of made it easier for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also
I just
what?
cheated. But also, like, talk and, like, recap while I think of something.
While you do what?
Okay, the story I
you
need
think
to
of a
tell.
story? You haven't thought of a story yet?
Oh, it's easy enough. Okay, so you, like, recap.
Well, I think both of us should like recap, like do a timed recap, or like we don't have to do a timed recap. We can just like one person can quickly recap, like the person who doesn't tell the story. But I think you should start with the first 3 lines.
Oh. Okay. Oh, do I have to say like the title of the book and the chapter or something, or do I just start reading?
Just be like chapter 1.
Level 1.
Level 1.
I was jolted awake by the sound of gunfire in one of the neighboring stacks. The shots were followed by a few minutes of muffled shouting and screaming, then silence. Gunfire wasn't important. I forgot that I have to, I had to wait. What do you call that? I forgot already. But yeah, you can do that post.
Okay, quickly. Wait, I actually partially remember what happened because a lot happened in this, but it was a lot of like, what do you call it? History in that sense. But okay, let me know.
Overarching.
Yeah, it was really broad. Let me know if I miss anything. Initially, he's sitting, we are in the stacks, which is an area that they got because the world overpopulated and like global crisis happened. So people move to stacks, which is sort of a cheaper housing stuff where they just stack not buildings, like caravans type
mobile
thing.
Homes.
Of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mobile homes. So this guy, Wade, he lives in one of these stacks with like 15 other people, which I didn't know. And then he like sleeps on top of a washing machine. So he's on his laptop there, just like watching episodes of something I don't remember. And then he goes into an existential crisis thinking at that time that the world is a lie, religion is a lie, everything's a lie, and that's it. And then his mom died when he was young, even though she was really like, she used to just put him in the Oasis, which was a VR set. Actually, I don't think it says VR set, but it was like a virtual reality world. And so he would go in the Oasis and whatnot, just learn, like do everything, learn, not educate, not eat, and everything else. And then he moved in with his aunt, who was really sort of low-key abusive.
Wait, why did he move into with his aunt?
Oh, because his mom died.
I'm asking just to. Oh, did you say that? I thought I
said his
hear
mom
you say
died,
that.
but then I went back to
and so, okay, that's why I got confused.
Not exactly chronological. And then
okay, got it.
Yeah, so he was in his laptop, so his mom's boyfriend comes in and sort of almost beats him up, but then he's like, okay, fine, take the laptop, because they're like, we can pawn it off and just earn something. And then he's like, oh, you get my food stamps, like, isn't that enough? And they're like, no. So he's like, okay, whatever. He like leaves creepily or slowly so other people don't hear it, because they can get.
I don't think it was creepy. I think he was.
I don't know. I thought he was just staring into windows, so maybe I don't know. But yeah, he runs into Mrs. someone.
Gilmore?
No.
Gilmore, right?
Gilmore, really? Okay, I don't know. So he runs into Mrs. Gilmore, who's super religious, and he's like, he doesn't like the fact that she's religious, but he's like, okay, I'll just let her live her life. And then
I know he's not religious, but he's fine with her praying for him just because that's what she believes.
Yeah, she's religious. He's like whatever. Okay, but then he goes down to the floor, whatever I don't know what they call it. It's really dark there. He has to turn on the light, even though it's like morning at this point, somewhat. He walks about more than a mile to this junkyard area where he's like goes in through the various cars and car doors, and then like opens a van, which is like really tiny, 4 feet by 5 feet by 9 feet. I don't know why I remember that, but I can't hear you anymore.
No, I was gonna say it's actually 4 feet by 4 feet by 9 feet.
Yeah. And then he that's his pad, or what did he call it? Like his, I don't know. But
Like
he keeps
private
all his like
space.
important stuff there because I mean everything else can get stolen, so that no one else has been here. So that's where he goes. He puts on his set to get into the Oasis, and it says "Welcome Parsival, Ready Player One." Boom, 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 boom. Chap level
You
2.
nailed that. You nailed it.
It was so all over the place. Because it was so
I mean,
long since I read it, so it's your fault.
I know you could have just had me do it actually, but then I was like, I was like,
Yeah,
oh
I
my God,
just
I was
realized I
thinking
was
about
like,
my
I
story.
read it so like 3-4 days ago.
I know, because I think it was just like overarching, but then you would like remember details.
Yeah.
So you were like, oh, detail. And then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, detail. So it's just funny. No, it's to each their own.
But
So
I think I
covered
covered
everything.
main things anyways.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, it was a good chapter because it was more like his day to day, which obviously it's just starting
Yeah,
off.
starting
So
off, I think that's
he's
pretty
trying to introduce this world
from his
that
eyes.
is, you know, very different from our current world.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
Oh, and
not
it's
that
like
different.
2045, I think.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
But yeah, it was a good story.
story time.
Story
The topic of
time.
today is temptation.
Temptation. See, so I just literally thought about it just as you were talking, and
Oh.
I think it just sparked off a thing. Yeah, zero prep went into this, but essentially, I was thinking about how, I don't know, when you this kind of ties in a little bit with like relationships as we were talking about it last week, but you know, those moments when you're talking to somebody and it's obvious that like they're trying really hard, and there's that weird line between, do you tell them, like that temptation of telling them or correcting them on something that's not necessarily like important, if that makes sense. So it's not like fact, like, oh, they think the world is flat and you don't like,
Right.
you're not going to tell them it's round. It's not like at that scale. It's just something very minor, but clearly it means something. So like clearly it means something to them, so you don't want to like burst their
Right.
bubble. I feel like I've had moments like that, especially in like my career, and it's hard, or like not my career, but like, you know, in the legal field, because not only from like my job perspective, but from like my personal life, when people come to me for legal advice, it's really hard to not step into my lawyer zone, or not to step into my legalese and start
Right.
explaining to them like they know what's happening, and at the same time appreciating that they are interpreting their situation as something completely different than how I normally would if I was in that situation, and respecting that.
Right.
And not just being like, okay, this is what you do and this is what you do, and then you'd be done. Like taking the time to be like, okay, like this is where they're coming from, that's why they think this, and instead of just explaining to them, or instead of just kind of, I don't know what equal term for mansplaining is, but instead of like belittling them or trying to say, well, why don't you know this, like this is
Right.
obvious, or something like that, trying to be more like empathetic on where they're coming from. It's like a conscious effort for me a lot of the times to be like, okay, like let them finish what they're saying, and just come to it from like a friend perspective as opposed to a lawyer perspective. So I think that like kind of temptation in the back of your mind to just be like to judge, or to just kind
Right.
of give an answer to someone is so like real. I feel like I've toned it down quite a bit since I've gone through law school, and I've
Right.
actually interacted with real people with real
Yeah,
issues. But initially, like when I got out of law school, it was like so strong because people came to me for advice. So in my head, I thought that's what they needed to hear, right? They just need someone to tell them what to do.
Right.
But I've also seen what happens when you do that, and it can rub people the wrong way, and they can be like, well, you're not in the situation, you don't know what you're talking about, or, you know, that's not what I'm talking about, that's not what I mean. And it can take things really like in a bad direction. So to be able to like have the patience to be like, okay, like I get why you feel so frustrated over what I think is not necessarily a big deal, and you know why it's okay that you feel this way, and then let me try to help you without being judgmental.
Right.
So like that just kind of like came into my mind in terms of like temptation is very, I feel like it, for the most part, it seems to have a negative connotation.
Right.
Like something that you want to do but you shouldn't do, or something that, you know, you can't do but you want to do. And I think in most perspectives it is a negative thing in terms of like something that maybe you should just not do. But there are other times when I feel like it's a helpful thing. So for example, in this chapter, like the reason I told you that I felt like I equated temptation in this chapter to make it easier for myself, to temptation to escape, was like it is really what drove him, or it is driving him to do something more than just do what everyone else in his
Right.
situation is doing, is to just accept it and live, in
Whatever.
that life. And he doesn't want to accept it. He wants to get out, and he wants to do something that's more than, what everyone else is doing. So
Yeah, I think
hopefully that's like a positive spin to
yeah,
temptation.
exactly. Because I think once when we picked the theme, and initially I was thinking about when I started reading, I was like, temptation would be really hard to, because I think in my head, temptation is somewhat negative, or like has been built
Mhm.
somewhat negative. So I actually ended up thinking about this negative positive even before I started reading a chapter, because I was like, is it a positive thing as well? So I actually Googled it, and it even in the definition area, it says thing you should not do but you like want to do. So I was like, wait, okay, maybe so it is
Right.
negative. But I think because, see, I don't know, I didn't really look at it from a positive stance at all. I tried to, but I
Mhm.
didn't, because I think because of being from somewhat a religious background, and like temptation has such a like a negative
Yeah.
connotation of like every temptation
Mhm.
is bad,
You got to resist.
yeah, and
Yeah, the
the
temptation.
entire focus is resisting that temptation, and no matter what it is. So I think that's why in my I was like, okay, so maybe I'll treat it as negative, and then I'll see if it comes as positive. And I think one of the things that you already mentioned, his temptation, I think something that I think I read within the chapter was how he like was, for me, what came to my head, because it starts with him being on his like I think laptop and on top of the machine, and then it comes back later that he shouldn't have brought this laptop here. So one of the strong points for me was, well, he was really tempted to do it and he did it, and it sort of ended up being bad for him. But I don't know if necessarily the temptation to feel good was negative. You know what I mean? I don't know if this makes,
Mm.
but like the outcome was negative, but temptation itself helped him feel good, which I think it always does to an extent. You might
To in the
regret it
short
later,
term.
yeah,
Mhm.
but in like intrinsically, it shouldn't be negative because it's making you feel good. It like
Yeah.
maybe not societally, but as a person, you do feel good by like telling that to some person.
Giving into it. I
Yeah,
mean, I think that's the whole premise behind temptation, is you should resist it because the pleasure you would get from it is temporary, right?
right.
From
And it
from
affects
from
other negative.
overarching.
Right.
Right. That at the end of it, you may like it right now, but it's gonna come around and bite you in the butt. Really,
Right.
like you might want to do it, and if you give in to temptation, then you may feel like you made the right decision,
Right.
and feel like, oh, what are you talking about? This was a good decision that I made, and then somehow it comes around that, oh, my laptop got
Yeah.
stolen. Maybe it wasn't a great idea to take my best laptop
Right.
into the
So I
street.
think so that
So
way temptation is sort of always accompanied by a negative event, I would say. And
sometimes though, but the reason I say I took it, or I tried my best to kind of see it in a positive sense, at least from this person. Actually, I think I only really saw it from a positive space. Is I think it's like the driving factor for him to go out and do things. It's like I think him giving into temptation is really the thing that's going to get him out of the situation he's in, is because he's like, you know what, I'm not going to stay in the, and like the disdain he has for his current living situation is is so strong. That's obviously a really strong like driving force for him to get out. But I think it's the temptation of wanting to be in this world, right? To kind of make his oasis world a reality is
right.
something why this competition means so much to him, and why he really wants to do all he can. He wants to devote 24 hours, 24 hours, 24/7, just
Yeah.
on this, because
Just
he's
24 hours.
like, this is just 24 hours. This is what's going to get him out, right? So like the temptation to get out is so strong that it's like, I need to devote my life to this.
And even
Like
I think
I need to know every single thing about this.
I think he is like, even through the, I mean, I think it says in the text how he was ready to give up when his mom died, and he just gave up on anything till that challenge came out, and like the
Mm-hmm.
the search began for that Easter egg. And I think he is tempted to get that egg, and
Mm-hmm.
because of, I don't know if you would call it temptation or would you call it a goal. I don't know if it's a different thing. But I think he is tempted to get that egg, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily for that like whatever, but it's just that temptation that's running his life at this point, because
Yeah.
otherwise he would just not have a purpose. So temptation
Yeah.
in that sense gives you a purpose, but I think day to
Yeah.
day for normal people, it's temptation's not giving you a purpose in life, but it's actually just like a
Yeah.
thing that happens.
Yeah. I mean, even for him, I feel like, so like a couple of the things I did highlight was in terms of, like I mentioned already, temptation to escape, because I feel like it was so strong in this chapter in terms of him, not only just Oasis, but in terms of his to his temptation to escape life kind of bleeds into everything. So like even his laptop, he like literally says like, the laptop served as my portable research library, video arcade, and home theater system. So it was like his whole life, it was just like about ignoring where he is currently, right? Even when he is at the RV, his whole life is spent in front of the TV to kind of, I mean, to in his laptop to get away from it, right? Everything else is related to not being present in where he is because he wants to escape where he is, right? So it's like everything he does, it's to kind of, what's the opposite of remind him? Forget about where he is, right? Forget about where he is. So it's like this.
But
this is really just
is that
a way to escape.
Good thing, or is that?
It can be both. In this case, it works out for him because the way he's escaping is helping him get closer to the egg. That's my interpretation. Is it's working out for him in normal circumstances, like you mentioned. For us, it's not a good thing, right? Our temptation to just be on social media all day and like disregard work is not going to get us anywhere, right? That temptation is strong. Like that's absolutely like so fucking true, right? Even in our normal day-to-day life, if I'm working and I see a notification, or not even a notification, doesn't even have to pop up, right? I just literally go, okay, oh, let me just see, right? That temptation, I feel like 50% of the time I end up giving in to my temptation because it's so easy, right? Sometimes the temptation is so small that you're like, okay, it'll take 2 seconds of my time to just go, okay, it's not there, and continue. As opposed to just being that will to say, don't look at it, is so much harder than just saying, okay, 2 seconds, done, right? But I think, and giving into that temptation is so easy.
Yeah, so I think like opposite of temptation would be like self-control per se.
Like, absolutely.
You generally want self-control, but sometimes it's okay to not have self-control because it
depends. I think it depends. Yeah, like the temptation, it really depends on and how hard or how small that temptation is, or like the consequences of giving into that temptation. How high are they? Right. And I feel like your brain does all that calculation for you and just is like, you know what, fuck it. And it's the same, like, like with food, right? You're like, oh, well, just a couple of things here and there. Like, let's just eat it. It's fine. Chips or whatever, cereal. So it's like a real struggle because the temptations are small in your head. You're like, oh, it's just one little thing of this. It's just one that, so you justify it for yourself, right? Like even for him, it's like, it's probably just, oh, it's just one little thing. I'm just going to watch a show or I'm just going to do this. And I don't know if I can really compare it to him because he's living in such a different life.
It's a different temptation
completely
differently for him.
Yeah, because I think for him, it's like, the more he gets into temptation to escape his reality, the better, because he learns more and more about, Halliday and the competition, and it's just helping him really. But yeah, I think for in real life, it's generally a negative connotation because of,
off of that, I think temptation, if I think about it, it's something that, I mean, once you give into temptation, like that, I guess the evil side of temptation would be that it's just easier to give in the next time. It's like the same as, I don't know, sin, or like once you do it, then it's like easier to do it again, or anything harmful in that sense. But turning temptation, once you've done it, you sort of justify it so easily that you're like not similarly tempted to do it again, because even if you are a little bit, you'll be like, oh, the consequences for the last time were this, so I know, so it's okay. I think same with like episodes, like watching episodes at night, or like even reading a lot. It's the same, like you like watch something and you're like, oh, I'm tempted to watch another, and then you're like, it's gonna be an hour, and then you watch it and then oh, it's okay, it was just an hour.
You justified it.
It goes off till like it's 5 a.m. But which I think same with TikTok, same with anything social media. That
I mean, social media I think is meant to digest in slow pieces so that it's easier for you to get, like justify it, for you to say, oh, it's just like TikTok is literally 30 seconds of your life. But literally, it's so easy to spend an hour on it, right? Which is mind blowing. Like it's like, okay, I'm watching maximum a
Hour on
minute per
15-second
video.
videos. Just imagine. Yeah.
It's ridiculous because I think the majority of videos you see are 30 seconds or less, right? It's rare that a video is a minute. So like the amount of videos that you're watching or even just scrolling through is it's
You're
crazy
getting
to think
fed a
about.
lot of content.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in so many different ways. I mean, TikTok, like, I don't mind it, but other platforms or other social media, I think can be kind of like, I know, I remember for Facebook and stuff, like how it was like, it felt like it was like a trap. Like people used to be stuck on those, what was that game? Farmville? Was it Farmville?
Farmville, oh my god, that was
Oh
such
my
a
God.
the whole
Or
world was
like,
such a
I was
stupid.
like, that's what I was really confused about. I was like, this
It
is
was
a
a stupid game.
stupid game, right? We can all agree this is a stupid game. Why is everyone so like? I guess temptation. Now we're kind of going into addiction a little bit, which we can kind of discuss later. But
Okay,
yeah,
I
let's
think,
see if I can find a few
yeah, I
clips.
think coming back to temptation, one of the big things that I highlighted like a full-on paragraph because I couldn't figure out where to highlight. But
Ooh,
it's
let
this
me see if I
paragraph
highlighted it.
about it's in quotes, and he said like it starts with like, but there was bad news. Well, but that's where the bad news came in. Our global civilization came at a huge cost, and like he goes on talking about like how we had to keep running on the fuel, and then we call this global energy crisis, and it's been going on for a while now. So that's this full paragraph.
Mm,
It's mainly like I think that for me drove from temptation, like the temptation of the entire humanity to get a little more from the world, and because
mm,
of that temptation throughout the world, it went into crisis because everyone was like, oh, like I am tempted to use this body spray, and like it's I think even the global energy crisis, oh no, yeah, it says energy, but like the climate change stuff, I think
mm,
everyone is still tempted to do a lot of things that don't affect environment healthily, but
mhm,
I think it's still if once and now a lot of people do it, and then we saw or like in this book we see the result of it, which is really bad,
mm,
and now they are coping with it with like creating stacks and all that crazy stuff, but no one can even blame people at this point because everyone did it. So I mean, temptation is something I think once you act on it, you can't really blame on anyone. I mean, you can, to be honest, but there's no point in blaming because there the action has sort of taken place. It's like you wasted an hour on TikTok. You can't be like, oh,
get it
I
back.
wasted an hour because that's not gonna make a difference. You did waste an hour. So I think, and then the outcome is negative in that sense. But I think this
Mm,
crisis thing sort of stayed, and then he talks about it a lot, like good old days, and talks a lot about it. And it just kept coming back on how, as people, we are so tempted to do. I mean, they're normal things, but like things that are bad for the environment. And because 90, not 90%, but a lot of people at this point know what's bad for the environment, but they still
mhm.
do it because it's
But I feel like it depends. I mean, so
a
I
lot of people
think
are
there's a
tempted to do it, but some
yeah,
control,
I
some
think
don't.
there's a huge for especially for this particular topic. I think there's such a huge not scale. What am I thinking of? Like I guess scale of like the kinds of people, the way they
Right?
treat
How
or
they
view
protect the
climate change.
yeah,
I think the way they view climate change is in direct correlation with how they treat
act, yeah,
the world. And I think there are obviously people who obviously care very deeply and are doing a lot about it, right, to decrease their carbon footprint. But then there's people who know a lot about it also, but at the same time aren't doing much about it, which I think I'm kind of around there.
yeah, yeah,
And then there are people who, don't know about it and don't care about it, don't do anything about it.
yeah. And they're like,
And
we'll
I
die.
feel like right. And I feel like that because that scale is so broad and there are so many like
Actors, yeah,
delineations, whatever between, it's hard to make like an overarching point. But I would say like it's the industry, in my personal opinion, hasn't gotten far enough to make like the normal person um to make that transition easy.
right,
So like even for me, like I've looked into like Grove, or like I feel like there are a lot of companies out there that try to make sustainable,
right,
cleaning products in the household, or other things that are made like for not just one-time use kind of situation. And you can do it if you look into it, and you can do it. But it's hard to find products that are just as good as one-time use, which sucks because it's like, you know, that it makes it harder for people to do that, make that sacrifice per se. B, it's generally more work to do it. And so when you're trying to propose it to normal consumers, it's like, but why? Why would I? And it sucks because we're so used to doing things so easily and doing this one-time use, because companies gave us that, you know, ease of use kind of situation. It's so hard to work harder to really convince people that, hey, why don't you work harder
to do this?
And you're not going to get any personal benefit. This is helping generations after you.
That is right. That's like the hard part. That's a hard sell. Either form that is.
So when you give someone a glass bottle of cleaner that they have to continuously refill themselves and do whatever and make sure, versus a plastic bottle that they can use and throw away, the temptation is always going to be, and they're most likely always going to give in to the one-time use, just because it's easier. I mean, you know, temptation's always easier.
Yeah, I think thinking more overarchingly, relating this, what it says in the book, I think because I was thinking, like, let's say, like with meat, like I'm not tempted to eat meat. I just eat meat. I think I'm not. I mean,
I think you are tempted to eat.
I guess I am.
Yeah, it's an intrinsic thing, because
it's like
if you didn't have that temptation, it's not outward. It's not explicit.
Right.
You know, in your mind, you're not like, I want to eat meat. It's just you do it because it's just something that.
Yeah.
Right. Because the space is so small between temptation and giving in.
More broadly speaking, like with companies and whatnot, because I think like in this case, like companies are always tempted to find like more oil or dig a little deeper or like get a little further than they should, sort of, which ends up ruining everything. So I think that is the temptation that usually, and like which is less calculated in that sense, where because I think with a lot of temptation now, you can sort of figure out the result before acting on the temptation. So I think
because you've done it multiple times.
Yeah, either you've done it multiple times or there's enough data around you to like tell you what not to do, sort of. But I think with capitalism and with everything, that usually takes a backseat. So you're like, we don't really care for it. So let's just our temptation is like we will give into it because we don't care about the effects in that sense. And that's what I think in my point.
I mean, I think so. Like, I don't know if this is a jump or if this is actually this makes sense, because I'm just thinking about it, thinking out loud. But in terms of your comment regarding eating meat and whether that's a temptation or if that's just something you do, right? And I feel like I can kind of make that comparison with how he feels about Oasis, right? Because like he talks about in there this is literally, and that's just because I read a comment, that I was more or less raised by the Oasis interactive educational programs, which any kid could access for free. So essentially he's been brought up on the Oasis. So getting into the Oasis, doing it every day is not a temptation to really escape reality. It's just something he does. It's just something that he's always done. And I think it became more of a reality to him than real life. And I think once you have like a parallel, real world, you know, and AR or virtual reality, and then your parents die, things happen horrible, you're poor, but in this way you're just good and everything's fine, and the virtual, it's never let you down. Why would you ever pick reality over that, right? So like you would always just want to live in that world, and you will do whatever you need to make sure that you can stay in that world. And you know, if that world, a bonus is the more you stay in that world, the closer you're going to get to being rich in real life. I mean, you know, why would you? Exactly. So I think like in that case for him, especially, like, I don't think it's like every day he wakes up and he's like, ooh, I'm like tempted to go to Oasis, or like, ooh, I want to. It's just he does it, right? Because it's just normal.
Ooh, wait, go ahead.
Oh, that's it.
Oh, because I mean, it's probably way far ahead, but I think temptation would come up again in like book 2, because that is where a clear divide comes on what.
I haven't read it.
No, what? Oh, you haven't read it. But okay, that will be a good book to talk about temptation.
Can you forget the second book before you read it?
I'll try. I mean, I've forgotten part 1.
You've already forgotten this chapter. So, and you just read that a few days ago.
I think one of the like literal temptations that came that the only I think sentence that I was like, ooh, temptation
Temptation.
was it where it literally just said, I discovered all of that gradually over several years, and it still made me feel like jumping off a bridge. And I was like, oh, so he was tempted to jump off a bridge.
I feel like, oh, temptation. He
I
felt
was
like
like,
doing it,
ooh,
but he
tempted to jump off.
didn't.
Because I think with our generation, I mean, not even our generation, I mean, I guess our generation to a point, and then Gen Z to a big more point. I think a lot of people have gone through stuff and whatnot, but like that temptation of wanting to just jump off a bridge, it's just with everyone. And
I agree. I think it's obviously varying degrees for sure for how strong that
oh yeah,
temptation is. But I think everyone in their life, for the most part, if they're normal, have had a couple of thoughts of being like, you know what, if like tomorrow didn't exist, be okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it'd be fine. I think I'd be okay with it. Like honestly, if everyone else wouldn't be so bothered about it, I'd be fine. Like, you know,
I was
but like
actually
it's
thinking the
not a
other
big
day
deal.
about you know how all these post-apocalyptic films and survival films, and I was
Mm,
actually like even just 2 days ago, I think I saw one zombie apocalypse trailer, I think, and I was thinking, would I want to like live? Like what is the
yeah.
point? Like
No,
it's
if a
I don't
zombie
think we
apocalypse
will fight
comes, like
that
shoot
hard
me
for
now.
survival. I don't know. Maybe we will,
No.
but it's just like
I mean, yeah, it's hard to say until you're
yeah,
in that situation. But like, I honestly, like, if that's coming, like, just kill me now. Like, I'd
yeah.
rather
I
just,
think the only reason to fight for survival would be if things are like cool and you're like, oh, I want to see what happens next, sort of. But of course, you're
or like, kids, or like your kids or your children or
that's
something
right.
like that. You may want to. Outside of that, if your life was the only one to worry about, like, I
And
want to
yeah,
put,
then you'll be
like,
like,
let me
eh,
put it
like
that way.
who cares?
Then I'd be like, you know what? But because there are so many people involved now, like you can't escape affecting other people. So
Right.
it's like that is really the driving force. I feel
Yeah,
like
that's
for
like
most
that's
people
what
to be
keeps
like,
you.
yeah, which I mean, yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's
if
turned
nothing
around a little
works,
bit, but it's okay. It's keeping you alive.
hey, whatever works. Yeah, exactly. Seriously,
But yeah,
but
what other
yeah,
one other thing
what was I
I
gonna say?
highlighted was I can pawn it to help pay our rent, which is what she said to him before taking his laptop. And
Mm,
I know why I thought of temptation at that point. It was, I think, mostly to do with the fact that she is always at the aunt, right? She's always tempted to have more. I don't know, have more money or sell more things. Either way, and probably it's
I
same.
think she's tempted to just have more money and just I don't know. That's generally how those kind of characters are portrayed, right? People who are poor but like mean about it. Like people who are like super poor but they don't have any empathy for other people who are poor,
Yeah,
which never made
because
sense
they're
to
in the
me. But
same condition technically. They're literally in the
right.
same.
Yeah. And he's a child. So
Yeah,
it's like there are a
and he
lot of
gives her his food stamp,
and she only have him stay. She's only
having him.
having stroke. Having him stay because of the food stamp. So it's
Yeah,
not like out of the generosity of her heart, she's like, oh, stay with me. No, it's like, oh, you come,
she
I
literally
get food
calls
stamps.
her boyfriend to like, I'm assuming beat him, but he just like makes a motion
Or
and he's like,
yeah,
yeah, take
because
it.
I'm sure she knows that it works.
Yeah, and
So
he's
instead of
probably
wasting
giving it.
time going back and forth, just have him come in,
Yeah.
do the job for her. But yeah, like I
This,
feel like
this,
there are
well,
a lot
yeah,
of
go ahead.
characters like that. And I was gonna say, I feel like I've seen a lot of characters like this exact lady in like a lot of books and movies about like, whether it be a drugged up poor
Yeah, being
woman
angry about situations
being
and then
angry, like
at the
just
world.
not
Yeah,
being empathetic and etc.
yeah.
Go for it.
But I think yeah,
What
one
do you
of
think?
wait, what was I gonna say? Oh,
This is what happens. You should just talk. You
yeah,
shouldn't.
yeah. I should just talk over it and then figure out. I think once you talk about it, please
Exactly.
go ahead and then you can talk more about it.
Okay, you know what quote I really like? What do you think?
Sure.
Um, when he's talking about just the oasis, and obviously it's like all encompassing and everything that it has, and just the thought, that sentence about like the realization of what it could mean, like the positive and the negative, in terms of like the collected knowledge, art, and amusement of all human civilization was there waiting for me. But gaining access to all of that information turned out to be something of a mixed blessing because of that, because that was when I found out the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like because there are so many things in life, and I know this is not necessarily in the temptation theme, but that are like that kind of mixed feeling, or that, what is that, bittersweet, where it's like it's kind of like super positive, and then you slowly realize the repercussions of it, and you realize, okay, like what's, what have I done, or what is this, like why didn't like I anticipate the negative aspects of this situation, because when something positive is happening, you kind of just go in, like, this is a very, very odd comparison, but I always kind of bring this up when so I like when I'm drafting contracts or anything like that, and when we're negotiating, especially when I'm working with internal like sales people, they're always like, oh yeah, that contract looks good, right? Let's just sign it, right? We're ready. Like both parties are excited. Like, let's do it. I was like, yeah, but we're both excited right now, right? Us and the client, we're both super excited. Everything's good. There's no issues. But if and when we sign this contract now, and then 5 years later there's an issue, nobody's gonna remember how happy you are. They're only gonna be looking at the terms of the contract. So we have to anticipate shit hitting the fan. Like, you can't just go in like la-di and everything's good now, but you have to kind of anticipate the things that could go wrong just so you're prepared. And I feel like this guy clearly didn't feel prepared, because he keeps feeling like, okay, people lied to me. Nobody told me there was all this truth out there.
Which he wasn't.
I wasn't prepared.
He didn't gain that experience at all. So his mom was like, here, take it, and then she would go into the Oasis and do whatever. So I think he was raised.
I mean, she was working. Granted, she was working 2 jobs. She was a single mom.
She was, yeah.
You can't really put the blame on the. I mean, people do it nowadays with phones.
I mean, yeah. And nowadays they don't have Oasis.
If you had an entire exactly, if you had an entire babysitter that was teaching my child,
actually, yeah, it's actually like,
you know what? And I'm working 2 jobs.
Yeah. Oh, I think even just off of that work,
like that fucking sentence.
What?
I go.
No,
I'll remember. You go.
I'll remember too. So.
No, you go. I'll actually remember. You forgot last time. Go.
Okay, no, I was gonna go off from your work. I was gonna go from your work example and talk about how what I've been pointed out a lot by like my bosses, and even my not coworkers but my bosses at this point, because I think something that's been grossly different from the field of engineering to the field of like psychology is I think as an engineer, I'm still always tempted to have an answer or like a solution, which is completely opposite to any field in psychology. Like, I've been literally called out at as even my questions that I ask, they're like, you don't need an answer for that. Like, you have to get that concept of not wanting to ask a thing and having an answer. So I think I'm still so tempted to ask it, and I ask it, and then they're like, why do you have an answer for that? You won't have an answer for that. And then I'm like, oh, this is weird for me right now. So I think even that, from like just generally, we are even, I think, going back through his knowledge expanse. I mean, I guess that could be a positive thing, like tempted to learn more or gain more knowledge, but it's not always positive. Like, even he says, like, I mean, yeah, that vast array of knowledge was partially positive for him, because he knew things, but then he just went down like thinking and went crazy, whatever. But yeah, I think you are like,
he didn't go crazy.
He did go crazy, but still, you are tempted to do things. Like, I am tempted to like gain knowledge of, like everything, or like watching like 20-minute video on Greek gods like at 3 a.m., which is good because you are learning something, but it's bad because it's at 3 a.m. and it's not gonna help me do anything. I suppose. So I think it's the gray area.
True. That's an interesting way to look at it.
It's so like, you don't know what knowledge, but I think since we don't know what knowledge will, like what kind of knowledge we'll use when we are gaining that knowledge, the temptation regarding that knowledge, I think it's okay, because you're gaining.
I think of all the temptations, like the temptation to learn more is really something you shouldn't stop yourself from going into. Like,
no matter what,
I think you should just go for it.
We go over it so much during like college time, whenever we were like, oh, I was searching for an article, and then I went through that like 10 articles later, I'm learning like 10 different names of, I don't know, planets. So I think
Yeah.
we know that that's bad for us in that moment, but
Yeah.
we also know that it's not a waste because it's still good information that we got. So
Right.
I think,
Yeah.
I think in my head, I do treat movies and TV shows in that way as well. So
Education.
yeah, I do treat, I'm like, I learned something from that episode and that.
Especially from Grey's Anatomy. I'm sure you're like, ooh,
Yeah, Grey's Anatomy, I'm like,
okay.
pause it, Google it. Ooh, okay, this food is me.
Yeah, I mean, especially from me, because your family's from that field. I'm sure that
Yeah,
you
I
make
know.
a lot more connections to it than a normal person would have.
Yeah.
So I totally get it.
But
Yeah.
I think that's something I even highlight it. I don't know, it just came to me, but
But yeah, no, that's a really like that's I think it kind of goes with what I said in terms of before about, the temptation to give in to provide an answer to someone that maybe necessarily doesn't need an answer, just
okay.
needs more questions, if that makes sense. Like sometimes
Or they
you
just
don't need to
need
be right, or
something
you don't need,
else other than
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I think that temptation to just kind of do what you know is right is not always right. I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense. Like
Which is
sometimes you're like,
100% what the text says, where he's like, I never
mhm.
had the heart to tell her that I thought organized religion was a total crock. It was pleasant.
There you go. The
That's
temptation to tell
literally it.
her,
Yeah.
we missed it. We found it. We found it
Yeah.
though. We got there.
Yeah.
No, but I think that is like the epitome
But
of like the temptation that we both talked about.
yeah, and
Is that
actually, I don't know
temptation
why
to not burst someone's bubble.
exactly. And I think I don't know why we didn't start with this intense because it literally says
Yeah.
right ahead, it was a pleasant fantasy that gave her hope and kept her going, which was exactly what the hunt was for me. So I think it's exactly
It's like
not wanting to do
if it was flashing in our eyes, we would have missed it. It was like that obvious.
yeah.
Oh my God. But no, we found it. I'm glad we found it and we
Yeah.
didn't find it in the next chapter to be like, oh my God.
Oh, remember that?
But yeah, no, that's so true. Like his temptation to reveal to him or to tell her that, hey, religion's not a thing, it's all fake. Yeah, like to be like, you know what, let her have that. And like same with me and my mom, it's like almost the same thing. And like with Vivek, which is actually super interesting, he gives into that temptation all the time because he feels like he's doing the right thing, or because he feels like it's his responsibility. Vivek. Oh, my Vivek is my husband. I'm married, happily married. And so he feels like it's his responsibility to like not educate, but yeah, like to kind of like to kind of be like, hey, like, why do you think that? And he approaches it respectfully. It's not like he's like, you're wrong, you're like religion, but like, yeah, you're stupid if you believe in God. He doesn't go like to that route, to that extent. But essentially trying to be like, you know what, like questioning it, like, hey, why do you think that? If that can be,
which makes you think. But me, I think like, that's also positive.
Yeah. But for me, I'm like, you know what, my mom's like, she lived a long time, like she's had a lot of life to live through, if that makes sense. If she wants to believe this thing and it makes her happy, she's not hurting anybody, including herself.
You in that comfort zone.
Yeah, like,
with, like
everyone has their thing, and I think if you start thinking, and obviously there's a huge difference between believing in a certain religion and practicing it yourself versus dictating what other people should be doing and all that. So like as long and my mom stays in that realm of I'm going to do this because it makes me happy and brings me comfort, and she doesn't push it on anybody else. Like she's never made my brother or I feel like we have to do something. Right. She would often guilt us into it, but not in a way that that's like as a mom, it's her job. But yeah, like Mrs. I feel like there's different ways to approach it.
Yeah, because I think like Mrs. G she prays for him, but like what she talks about is like the 80s and 70s, which he's interested in. So she's sort of using that as like, oh, I am like not using probably is the right word, but still she is praying for him, and I mean telling him as well that I'm praying for you. But she's not like forcing her opinions about religion, and she's just telling her experiences and I'm gonna do this for you, sort of, even if he doesn't believe in it. But I think plus he knows that like telling like the temptation where it comes in, he is tempted to tell her that it's like wrong or whatever, but he knows that that's not gonna help anyone. Like it's literally gonna make her life worse, or she's gonna start hating him. That's it. So I think you have to realize that point of what telling someone would do to them versus, because absolutely,
you have to be kind of Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
focus because we focus so much on what I think, especially these days, or this new culture of millennials and Gen Z, of focusing on yourself and like not caring what the world thinks of you. But I think
Yeah.
there's such a good line of, you have to understand the other person's like perspective in that sense. Because I think something
Empathy.
I think listened or read somewhere was how for our generation things like are somewhat changing. With, I remember growing up, we learned a lot about like actions that are judged by intentions. Like that's also like part of the religion as well. And then generally we are that
Mm,
your intention is what matters. But then now we are sort of learning that intention does not matter. It's what the result was that matters. Like if your intention was
complete
all nice
opposite.
and if you were all not like you wanted good for someone else, but you
Hmm.
clearly said something and they were hurt by that, that is still on you. That's not on them because you hurt them, even
Absolutely.
though your intention
Yeah.
was nice. Which
Yeah.
I think it's a
I
lot of
think it's
like
like a cop
different.
out. Like that initial thought process of, oh, as long as my intentions or as long as my thoughts were good, but my actions weren't, that's okay. Like that's
Yeah,
such a cop out. Like you're making an
it is
excuse
a
for your
big cloud.
behavior. Yeah, no, it's not like acceptable. I think like teaching empathy is so important because like the amount of people I've encountered as an adult who clearly don't have an ounce of empathy is crazy. And like you see it every day. People, not even people I know, but like, people on social media, you see all the time that you feel like, how do you not realize what you're saying affects other people in a negative way? Like, how do you not think about it? Like the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes is like a lost art almost nowadays. I feel like it's there for like the when you look, on social media, there are glimpses of it, but I feel like for such a majority of the news and social media is so negative and is people hating on people because they just fail to see how the other side thinks, or like the other person feels and what they may be going through. And I feel like it's so tough to, and it's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes unless you've been taught how to at like a young age. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it takes a long
It
time.
takes a lot.
Like my dad was like the biggest student of that, is still the biggest student of that. Like he used to grow up, like he literally, I had a conversation with him recently, and we can talk about this offline. But like I had a conversation with him recently about this because he called me up kind of out of the blue and like was talking about how he feels like he is learning more about himself than he ever has, like, and kind of figuring out how and why he does a lot of the things that he does. And he was very explicit about how he had zero empathy, like for anybody, until he got married, and like years and years into the marriage was then finally when things were
Building
clicking
that.
about
Yeah.
how his actions and words affect other people. Because before then, when he was like before 25, 26, 27, I don't even remember, he was under the impression of it's his world and everyone's just living in it, where it was just like, my actions and words don't affect you, and if they do, that's not my problem, that's your problem of how you're interpreting my words, right? It was always seen as and Vivek has this sometimes, right, where it's like, hey, I'm saying this, it shouldn't matter to you, why is it mattering to you?
Yeah.
That's your problem.
Yeah.
Right? Of like, hey, this is not a big deal to me, so why is it a big deal to you? Of that mindset takes years to kind of get out of, because you've grown up like
Learning.
everyone telling you, your family, right, your family kind of saying, okay, yeah, what you think is right, don't worry about anybody else, like, what you're doing is always right. And not explicitly, but
Yeah, I
by
feel like
just by
if they
action.
said that explicitly, it would help a lot of people. But
Actually, yeah. But yeah, so I feel like that it takes a long time to kind of learn that, to kind of be empathetic with people and to know what that means.
and I think, to be honest, like
But
the intention versus action thing, I think it does, like, yeah, it does make sense. Like the whole, like the actions are judged by intentions. I get it, but I think that
mhm,
only works if like everyone's just like fully self-aware, which is like
yeah.
it's not the world we're living in. Like 80-year-old
Mm-mm.
people are not even self-aware at this point. So I think if you are at that top of that pyramid, like the Maslow's pyramid, okay, then yeah,
It
that
applies
makes
to
sense.
you.
Then your intentions make sense.
But it also has to be, the person I'm interacting with also has to be at that level.
Exactly.
It can't be
Everyone has to be at the level.
right. It can't be I'm
It's
at that
not,
level, so
yeah.
I expect everyone else to be at that level. That's not how it works,
Yeah.
right? But
Even if there's like a miss or like not on the same level, then yeah, it always leads to
Recipe for disaster.
some negative feeling in some way.
Yeah. You know what I quickly just saw as I was just scrolling through was we were talking about, a temptation to be honest with someone and like to kind of just not be empathetic and just say, hey, this is what it is.
Right.
And like I was just reading this because we were talking about how he said, I wish people were honest with me, or I wish I knew the truth, and I feel like I've been lied to. And then literally a couple of pages later, he's like, okay, on second thought, maybe honesty isn't the best policy, right? And so I think maybe it made him a little bit empathetic of why people lie, and to feel like, you know what, because the real world sucks. Like I don't need to be told the truth, the absolute truth.
Right away. Yeah.
And so I feel like that is so like a realization.
Yeah, I think you wouldn't talk about climate change with kids before they know what good environment is. Because if you start off with all the truth, which is usually when we say truth is usually all the like crazy stuff happening in the world, then they've not had a picture of what it's to be right, or like what it's not right.
But could it be framed in that, hey, this is a really shitty situation we are in, but let's talk about how we can get out of it, right? That would be the positive spin, as opposed to this is where we used to be, now we're here.
Yeah.
Or instead of being like, here's where we are, this is where we can be, right? Let's kind of build up.
But I think that's why it has to start off with the better thing, because if you start off with the worst thing, then there could be a like question of why do you need to be better, like why we are living through this, so it's whatever. Whereas you have to make
but I think
realize that the good is good for everyone and for you. So like trees will be good for you and for other people, but I mean, they're being killed in deforestation, blah blah blah, and they're ruining the environment. Because
no, you can't say it like that, because what happens, I think, if you and it obviously depends on who you're talking to. But when you frame it like that, of hey, we were in this utopia of beauty, and now you destroyed it.
You're saying how we can be, starting with like the future.
Starting with the future.
Starting,
and then you go
going to
come back into the present.
Okay.
All right. I would totally do the opposite though.
We'll see.
Because I feel like it's an easier thing to swallow. It's an easier pill to swallow.
I think the best thing would be when you have two kids, you raise one way and the other way, and we'll see in 20 years.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm totally going to be treating my kids like guinea pigs. Like I'm totally like, I've already thought of so many things that I'm going to be like.
I was literally the other day, I was telling Sadaf, like, let's like make Rohan watch like, like Saw and all these intense movies while he's growing up, to see what happens in 20 years, like just to check it out.
I'll do a study on him and how fucked up he turned out. Nah, bruh. But like, no, I've like legit thought like seriously about how I'm going to approach raising my child, just in terms of the things I want him or her to know and grow up.
Yeah.
And because especially because, and this is the endless fucking cycle of you always want your kids to have what you didn't, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I was never talked with about things like ever.
Yeah.
I feel like my parents were always here and I was always here and I was always just a kid and I just grew up, and all I knew when I was growing up was like school fun, which is great.
Yeah.
Great childhood. Like I can't really complain about it.
Exactly.
But at the same time, I feel like I feel like I didn't grow up. Like I didn't learn. I had to do everything myself in terms of like the introspection.
Yeah.
I was never taught how to talk about my feelings or to feel things and be.
I think that's also really
I was always making fun of my
like
feelings.
South Asians.
It is, but I feel like it's a culture that we can and should change, because that culture of let's not talk about our feelings is like, I'm over it. Like it's even within my family, like my parents and my brother, we've gotten way better at it, like way better at it.
Yeah.
Like the conversation I had with my dad, like I don't think Vivek would ever have with his family, like, which sucks.
Yep.
And I've told him, I was like, have you and your brother and your mom like had a?
He's probably like,
oh no, real conversation.
Your friend, you won't get it. They won't.
Yeah, and we don't need it. Like we don't need to sit down and have a conversation. Like the conversations we have are like normal and like we don't need to do that. I think I'm not saying you need to. I think it's going to be helpful for both of you, for everyone involved, to openly speak about feelings and say that, hey, when you told me that I look fat and every single time I call you, that hurts me, right? Not me, Vivek, who is not fat. Every time he picks up the phone, it's like they mention or make a comment about something.
And I'm like, can't really see, even if he says that it hurts me right now, they will be like, since they're not having those conversations, they'll be like, oh, haha, like, don't get hurt.
I know. And honestly, like, I know, I'm sorry, I feel like I keep spitting on. Every time, like, I just separate myself, like, if I feel like I'm going to react badly so with anything that they're saying. So for example, his brother has a habit of calling me teacher because of how I like, I don't know. I have no idea. I take it in a negative connotation. I don't think it's certainly meant like in a positive way.
Or like what?
No, I think it's like my attitude, the way I
maybe you like call them out on things or like questions.
Because I can speak English. I don't know. It could be a lot of things. It could be a lot of things. But regardless, I don't poke the bear. It's not worth it because they're not my, I don't feel the need to educate them. So, but I always assumed, and because I was always told by Vivek that he didn't mind those things, that when they make fun of him or they make comments, it's not a big deal to him. And so I've always like, you know what, live and let live. If it affects me, I separate myself. If it doesn't affect you, you continue on. But literally just recently, like a week ago, like he was like, I could tell him feeling super self-conscious about being called out and saying that, oh, do I look fat? Like, and I started coming into his defense. Like anytime they would say anything, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, he doesn't look like that. He looks fine. His hair's fine. He's not chubby. Like all these things that like you wouldn't need to defend your husband about to his own family. Like it sounds weird, but it's like, like he doesn't see, I can see that A, he doesn't mind it, but B, he appreciates when I step in. So it's like, he doesn't have the heart to tell them anything because he knows that they're not coming from a bad place, but they don't see how it affects other people.
Haven't had, I think same with my dad, because even my mom and my dad, there's a clear difference of who I can talk to about what sort of. And I think we were talking about this, how I think there is one life that you can, like, I don't have to talk to my dad about like feelings and whatnot, and we can literally live next 30 years and he won't be in this world anymore. And but I think because in my head, I think our overall arcing life purpose is reaching that ultimate self-awareness, self-assurance. I think for that, you need those conversations. You need that idea of feelings, empathy, everything. And because if you're not doing that, then you're literally just surviving and elongating that.
You're living life without living life. Like you're honestly, and not to its full potential. Like, let me put it that way, right? Because I feel like it's so fulfilling to feel okay with your feelings and to have conversations with people about their feelings.
And feeling is such a loss of life.
Yes. But like most people don't even realize it, right? Most people feel like, I don't know when. I don't know when or why it became a thing that talking about feelings was like, a girly thing to do, or
I think to be honest, when people needed, or like world, I guess maybe organizations needed people to just work and just earn money and do all that. So
fight for their country.
Feelings, work for 16 hours and then go home and sleep.
And
it became a normal thing.
I feel like people have done such a shitty thing to people, which I know is such a I'd say thanks, Miss Obvious kind of situation. But like I feel like it's so shitty to think about that literally we are the root cause of our problem. Like we're gonna be what's that? We're gonna be the cause of our demise? No, what is it? Something of demise, I don't remember. But I feel like it's so true. Like we fucked a lot of things up. And we're just now realizing it, which at least better late than never, I guess.
But I mean, to be honest, we realize it and they were like, and then we go back to like,
because it's so much easier, right? Like, I know. Yeah. But we'll see where this world ends up. We'll be in 2045. At least we'll have VR, man.
That's true.
You know what's gonna happen though?
Yeah.
We're gonna get to 2045. World is shit. And we're still living in reality.
And we won't have VR. Yeah. It'll be that same of when we were in 1995, we were like flying cars in 2020, and that did not happen at all. We were
Man, when
expecting.
like 2020, I think it was like maybe 2025 or 2021 or something gets mentioned, I was like, "Whoa, that's now!" And like,
Yeah.
I wondered like, things should start happening, but like nothing's happening yet. But
In
then again, like a
2025,
lot
it's
of
like
things are happening.
same things, just different internet, different phones, but that's
Yeah.
it.
No, I feel like a lot has happened.
Yeah.
Like if you think about the past, like what, 50 years? Like when was the first phone? Not first phone, but like smartphone.
Well, iPhone came out 2007.
So it's not what? It's
Yeah.
been like 13, 14 years.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And now they're on iPhone 13. Actually, yeah, iPhone 13, so 13, 14 years.
That's gross. I don't know why, but it's just gross that our entire lives are like,
that.
you know.
But
But yeah, no wonder older people are like,
what is
what
happening?
is happening?
Yeah.
Like for them, it must be like living life. Wow, like I can't imagine what their life must be like.
Imagine for like a 90-year-old person, every
Imagine this
crazy thing
Mrs.
happened in
Gilmore.
like that last part of life.
Imagine Mrs. Gilmore fucking being in VR, who's lived through the 80s.
Yeah. Oh.
Like, that's fucking crazy. I just
I feel
don't.
like I really get it, like the way she's sort of dealing it, like spending all her time in the VR as well, because that's what happened with our parents as well. They got exposed to it, they rejected it straight up for like 5 years,
Yeah.
and then they went in and they just can't leave it. Yeah.
But not only that, but you know what's funny, and like the parallel that we can draw here is like, even like, what does she do in the Oasis? Even if she's there 24/7,
Do the same thing. Yes, 100%.
she's in churches, right?
Yeah.
She's in churches. So like, even with like, I feel like parents and
Yeah,
adults in
she's doing
social
this.
media, it's like instead of rumors spreading word of mouth, rumors spread on the internet. It's
Yeah.
like that's all it is for them. I feel like from my personal experience, especially Indian people in my family, the WhatsApp that we have for our family is like 80% like
Ours is
bullshit
like
stuff.
95% forwarded messages.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all like, you know, most of them I'm like, why are you sharing this? But it's just because it's like forward.
It's just being
forward.
shared on like tick, 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 next.
It's like disappointing. It's like you are not utilizing technology to its like beautiful, you know, extent. You're just
And
forwarding
that's why
shit.
I think the same people, when you talk to about technology, they're so against it. They will be like vocally like, this is ruining the
It's
world.
like,
blah,
oh, what's
blah,
it
blah.
for?
Because yeah, you don't know the whole good side of
You're
it.
not using it in
Yeah.
the way that, yeah, it should be. But yeah.
I think we've been talking for like an hour.
So what? Our friendship
Yeah.
has a time limit now?
And like people recommend us talking for like 2 hours. So you know, too much.
I don't give a shit about people. Because you know what? How many views our video got? I think it was like 10, which I'm like, wow. Who are these people?
It was 1 hour, 15-minute video. I mean, it tells you an
Well,
average.
I don't think views mean they watch the whole thing.
Yeah, no, it
right?
actually tells you what's the average time people watched it. And it
Oh
was
shit! I want to
3
know
minutes.
that stuff.
It was like
I want
3
to see.
minutes.
And you know what? The first 3 fucking minutes were me trying to figure out how to do a fucking wallpaper. Bro, we need to cut out like all this bullshit. We need to start editing. We need to start editing if we need to make it big.
Like 10 chapters, because I think we need to like I think get
I mean,
used
this is
to
like
it.
prime content.
Yeah.
This is what people
Okay,
watch on
is
YouTube
this
nowadays.
it? Is this all that we want to talk from the chapter?
Okay, wait. Let me look through my highlights.
I think yeah, mine is ended. Mine just comes to chapter 2. I love how this chapter like ends, because that's like, because when like you'll see in
Ready
two, it's
Player
so
One.
satisfying when it's like
I want to watch the
Ready
movie.
Player 2. It's like ooh,
I want to watch the movie.
of this
What
one
we should
you'll be annoyed because now
You know what I want to do after we read the whole book
oh yeah, hold
is
on.
we watch the movie.
Ooh, let's do like a watch party together. Like ooh, that will be so.
But we can't
good.
post that shit though. Actually, we can post
No,
our
we can
reactions.
post our reactions. Yeah.
Stop copying me.
No.
Although I think there's a clear lag, so like I'm saying things, and then like 5 minutes later, you're like, yeah, you just did it. You don't know it, but
I
you
will
just did
hear
it.
it, interpret it, and then figure
You
out.
should just anticipate what I'm going to say and then react that way.
Okay, good.
Hey, you nailed it.
Okay.
Good
That's
call.
it. Ready Player One, chapter.
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever. I'm assuming
Wait, how did we end the first episode? Did we like talk about? I think
we did this. No, I'm just kidding. I think we read the last part.
Favorite sentences.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah, I think I have one actually.
You already have one?
No, I think
there's one that's like obvious that I just like because it's like sassy.
Glass House is one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was highlighted like 3,000 something times, and I was like, oh, okay, so people know about it.
Oh, you don't want to do what other people do just because other people do them?
Yeah, you usually took that route.
That's true. Okay, fine, I'll pick another one.
But I mean,
the other ones I've already said.
Okay, you go ahead first.
Okay, no, I went first last time.
Wait, it was, I think, end of something.
I've already said most of my highlights, so.
Oh yeah, the last sentence of the initial area where it said, well, I'll just read the sentence. But gaining access to all of the information turned out to be something of a mixed blessing, because that was when I found out the truth.
But I guess you can pick that as your favorite. I forgot the point of the exercise. Yeah. I thought it was just like, say a sentence. I was like, I've already said that one. Okay, cool. Okay, ready? Mine's a little bit long.
Okay.
If I was feeling depressed or frustrated about my lot in life, all I had to do was tap the player one button and my worries would instantly slip away as my mind focused itself on the relentless pixelated onslaught on the screen in front of me. There, inside the game's two-dimensional universe, life was simple. I should have picked the second sentence.
Yeah, you just life simple. That's it. Okay.
Anyway, but yeah, that's a good one. I feel like that encapsulates the whole chapter, so I think that's a good end. Wait, didn't we like read something else?
No, I think that was it. And then we had talked a little bit about the theme for next chapter.
Okay, the theme for next chapter. Let me look at your list.
Yeah, let's keep it a little simpler this time. How about
exposure? Well, I don't know. How about we actually randomize and I just close my eyes and I point to one?
Oh, I just randomly picked exposure.
You didn't randomly pick it.
I mean, I looked.
You clearly looked through the list. And you're like,
not through the list. I was like, oh, I saw exposure.
Okay, ready?
Exposure. Exposure.
Hope.
Hope? No. I feel like hope's like one of the.
Another one. What is it? Priority. Oh.
Exposure, I think.
Okay, fine. One more. What do you mean exposure?
To things, to the world, to new things. Because he's gonna. Oh, they'll be cool.
So broad. Like every single sentence, I'm gonna be like, oh, yes, he was exposed to the outside world.
But yeah, we will talk about like why it matters and like what works.
Conservation. Yeah. Why am I picking such peepee ones?
I'm telling exposure.
Mystery. Ooh.
No, we'll keep that for later when like they start the question.
I literally picked this.
Exposure? Oh. Yeah, we can do that as well.
That's a good one. Page break in life. Ready? Last one. Vulnerability.
Oh, no.
I feel like you would say that to literally any other theme I picked.
No, I think vulnerability is like too.
Exposure? Okay, FYI, you pick temptation. So I get to pick the next one.
Okay, fine. Yeah, you pick it.
Okay, wait, I had to do the thing again.
No, just like think a little and then pick it. What do we want to talk about? Like, think about that.
Despair.
Despair. Ooh. I think we already did temptation. Let's keep a little positive something. Like a happy.
Yeah, because exposure was so positive. Ooh, kindness.
Okay, that works.
Kindness.
Yeah.
Okay, kindness.
Kindness.
Yeah.
So we'll be
Level
talking
2.
level 2 kindness. Actually, chapter 2. I think let's keep it with chapter 2 because it's chapter 2.
I like level 2.
No, he's not increasing levels. He's just there.
He's living through life and he's getting by. That's how you get through levels in life. You move on. You move forward. Okay, level 2, kindness.
Or chapter 2 kindness, whichever way you want. How do I stop it? I was about to end the meeting. Wait.
That works.
And